go along. Some of it, while the webinar is happening, the ones that we don't cover, we'll try to cover at the end of it. Thank you, the panel, for giving your valuable time for today. We have with us Devendra. Devendra is a Chief Principal Consultant with Persistent Systems. He is a veteran in cybersecurity, privacy, and AI governance with about 2 decades of experience with firms like Wipro, KPMG, and NPCI. He builds scalable digital risk frameworks and advises CXOs on compliance and trust. At Persistent, he leads strategic governance across different sectors. Devendra, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
We also have with us Sarita. Sarita is a senior director at Protiviti Technologies. She is a cybersecurity and privacy leader with about 2 decades of experience across digital health, national ID, and financial inclusion projects. At Protiviti, she leads security programs and drives innovations in privacy compliance. She also serves as a board member at YCS India, advocating for women in cybersecurity. Thank you, Sarita, for joining us today. Last but not the least, we have Ashish with us. Ashish is the CTO at IDfy. He has about 3 decades of experience in global IT experience, specializing in technology leadership, product engineering, and digital transformations. He's been a CTO at Barclays before joining IDfy and has led major programs across financial services, healthcare, and government. At IDfy, he drives innovation and scalable technology solutions. Thanks, Ashish, for joining us.
Thank you.
Lastly, it's me, Rishikesh, who will be the moderator for the session today. I've been with IDfy for about 8 years now. Before this, I helped architect the video KYC product at IDfy and led the implementation across major banks in India. Now I lead Privy from a technology standpoint and the privacy governance suite at Privy for IDfy. Thank you for all the attendees again. We'll kind of get started now. So the webinar, like the title is very reflective, right? Is primarily discussing about how do we go from discovery or data discovery to the trust landscape under the new DPDPA compliance. What we are going to cover today here is primarily the 18 months of discussion that we've had with different data fiduciaries who have revealed a consistent challenge. They are unable to translate DPDP requirement to actionable steps. For many, the starting point remains unclear and there's uncertainty around how to approach compliance in a way that is both practical and sustainable. Today's discussion distills the most pressing questions we've encountered in the field, bringing expert insights to help navigate the path from data discovery to trustworthy governance. In a world where data is both an asset and a liability, Indian enterprises are at a pivotal moment. With DPDP Act in motion, trust isn't just a value, it is a competitive advantage. And what we see today is organizations are drowning in data spread across various systems like cloud, on-premise, logs, and different vendors. This is something that we are seeing is making increasingly difficult when it comes to tracking personal data, how it is being used, and who has access to it. This lack of visibility creates a problem for compliance, harms customer trust, and slows down operation. This also adds to increase in the number of data breaches that could possibly happen. What I want to bring in from the panel here is how do you guys think we should address this problem? How is shadow data kind of feeding into this lack of compliance? Over to Ashish to get us started, and the rest of the guys can follow.
Thank you, Rishi, and welcome to all the attendees and to my fellow panelists, Dave and Sarita. This is very interesting. This is dear to my heart when we talk about, coming from the IT background and seeing it because, all of us at some point or these other, and which is why the act and the rule has come in, have been facing this problem of privacy in general, right? Where our data, without our knowledge, without the transparency for the reason it is being there, and we all face that on a daily basis when we get the number of spam calls where our information is revealed. And I think I'm very happy that this government and they have taken a cause up really seriously to get this in place. Now, coming to what Rishi posed specifically, First of all, we must understand in this digital ecosystem and digital applications, you have a data life cycle. Now, you try to do the best by designing systems to manage the data that flows through your application services, with creating modern architecture, even to the extent of creating modern data architectures. But the fact of the matter is that data, as it flows in the life cycle, and as you process customers' requests, as you look at insights, and with this quest of data is the new oil, which has been going on for the last decade, you tend to use data, you tend to provide data to people internally, to your partners, and so on. And there lies a little problem in that whole perspective. Data that is of this nature, what kind of data is being shared, how it is being processed, has there been the whole issue of that? So when we take shadow data, we're not talking about the transactional data, it is there, but it's copy that could exist. You could even take something as simple as a screenshot of the data that is there. You may put it in an email and send it as a report of the data, not realizing how we want to identify that person, not realizing the kind of information that you have put in that, and whether you have set the right confidentiality aspects with this data. Because remember, with the data governance and the data architecture, there are very fundamental principles that are involved. You need to understand how that whole data life cycle has to be managed throughout the process. Now, the fundamental problem, after having defined what it is, with the shadow data, that breaks sort of the privacy aspect is that it may be, and that is where the whole purpose goes in. If you think about from a privacy, it may be invisible to the consent and purpose for which this was taken. And there lies the problem which you need to address as a part of that. So when you think about addressing that whole dimension, that where this data is, you cannot consider this data as anywhere other than, and should be part of the core aspects, that if this data is being created, you should have the right controls in place to manage them. For instance, you must tag all these data pipelines, because at the end of the day, remember, when the data gets created, it only gets transformed and all that throughout its life cycle. That's what happens to it. So you must tag all the pipelines of data that flows in an organization. You must think about how do you retain that data? What are the means and channels with which you're going to share this data? Which is why a lot of organizations put DLP solutions in order to see that the data are not going through the other than the prescribed channels. And hence, you also need to consider that not only your fundamental data flow that is happening, but even this needs to be part of the data discovery, a solution that should be there and existing. So I'd like to pause there, but that's the whole gist of it, what I would consider that you should approach it from.
Absolutely spot on, Ashish. Sarita, are there examples or models that you've seen since you've been part of the GDPR implementation and international privacy laws that follow, which can be reused here, or anything that you want to bring out from learnings from that particular area of implementation?
Yeah, certainly, because Ashish has covered it completely, but I would just simplify what the shadow data is. Shadow data, in a short term, we can say any data or the assets which have been created and which is beyond the IT team's coverage, right? Or the organization that we feel that we have protected. Okay, we have protection across, but this data is something which is outside your boundary, which is lying beyond many copies. And when we talk about the global regulations or the international frameworks, definitely the risk is magnified that we have seen, right? So we have seen, considering the impact of GDPR or CCPA, so who focuses on the data minimization, their focus is absolutely on data minimization, and which we actually work in a other way around. A lot of time I have seen on ground, like when we need to collect a data specifically in order to enable a public service, so we go ahead, collect additional data. Okay, because maybe in future we would need that data. Okay,
Yes.
considering that, or maybe for some other research purpose we can leverage this additional data since we are collecting on ground. So let's collect 2 additional data points. So that's the practice we right now need to avoid. Okay, so as rightly said, and the learning that we all should look at it is you are accountable even for the data that you don't know that exist, or you never knew that you had it as part of your system. You have collected it, you might not have known it, right? So for that, definitely data discovery is a first point. We all have DLP, and there is a classification which is in place, but discovery is beyond DLP, which gives us the focus on knowing our data, the first step to achieve the privacy. Yeah.
Uh, so I think what I'm hearing from both Ashish and Sarita is everybody is agreeing to the fact that there should be discovery, but how do everybody feels that I know where my data is? Are there any telltale signs of what could it look like if I have poor governance in terms of data or I have better governance? Dave, anything that you've seen from your implementations over the last 2 decades?
So, very interestingly, Ashish and Sarita brought out this point. I'll go back with one discussion I had with one of the CIOs, and he said, "I don't know where all the data is." I asked him a very simple question: do you even know what all data is residing in your own laptop? He said, "Even I don't know." That's where. So then my second question to him was, "What was the reason you ended up saving so much of data?" Simple answer is just in case if I am unable to access, it's just a backup. Application was not working, so I took the screenshots. These are various triggers. So triggers can be because I don't have a DLP in picture, or my application is not working, or MDM solution is not there, which is unable to monitor mobiles. These are various triggers. Which something which is not identified, you cannot monitor it. If you cannot monitor it, that means you are exposing your or increasing your attack surface. That
Yeah.
means you are leading to non-compliant. From a governance point of view, there are various frameworks. Of course, Sarita brought out data minimization. That's very apt because that's where the things start. If you honestly ask me, can this be manually done? Answer is no. You can reach to 10%, 20%, 30%. It's not possible. Something that can automate it and keep checking my systems, whether it is online or the moment the what we call it the shadow data, wherever it is residing. The moment it gets connected, I'm able to monitor it on a continuous basis. That's the key. It is just not a one-time activity. That has been my experience. It cannot be one time. That's the key here.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing from you is you're saying I can do it, but cannot be done manually, right? So are there ways to automate this, and what are the nuances of India specific PI that come in here? Because we have about 7 different OVDs just to start with, which is our basic requirement to get one KYC done in India. So are there challenges that you see compared to international capabilities or international tooling where India context is very important when solving for discovery?
See, India has been, when it comes to data, it's a challenge. It's a good playground also for learning, to make any tool learn what exactly it's required. Mainly because of the multiple languages, maybe the kind of the data we have. We have Aadhaar card, we have credit card, so much of banking, PAN card, then Ration card, voter ID card. There are a lot of things. Uh, and then you have the local languages also. So automation, yes, up to an extent can be done, but something which brings in the local flavor. Am I able to identify my electricity bill? You know, wherever the regex is there, it is easier. What about the unstructured data that comes into the picture? That is so. Whenever if I go for a tool evaluation, it's just not I'm able to identify 1 2 3 4 5. I need to get into the specific data points also. What is that I'm collecting, and is the tool able to identify? That is the key criteria when you're doing a proof of concept for any tool. Specifically answering your question, there is a huge difference between the kind of data the Indian content that get collected as compared to outside. Reason being the multiple data points we have and the tendency of we keeping backup of the backup of the backup.
Yeah. Superb. Ashish, have you seen any technological solution which can help solve for these specific India nuances? Since IDfy I know operates in the KYC space, how do you guys do it? Anything that you could share from your journey?
I'll take that up, Rishi. In a scenario, there was an interesting aspect that came up. I was in my dealing with the clients. Clients, as part of the journeys, collect as a proof of identity or as a proof of address documents. And some of the organizations don't actually collect Aadhaar. Actually, from that perspective, they collect driving licenses, which have so many formats. The organization, knowingly or unknowingly, is collecting Aadhaar because a customer who's coming to the website was uploading the Aadhaar, even though it was not required to, right? And the interesting paradigm was that these became a part of their document set, which they had collected for the customer. And now the problem came for the organization is, as per Aadhaar Act, you need to mask it also and keep it. The fundamental problem when they came to us was, can you run a thing to identify it's an Aadhaar, mask it for it, and give it? And then said, okay. But then the question, when they were doing with the compliance, and says, but it should not happen going forward. That was there. And it was so interesting because the root cause was not to just do an activity one time, but build in the process of that. IDfy being in the business of this KYC, using AI models to detect documents of all Indian documents of all formats, we said you need to have a document validation plugged into your digital journey that would identify that it is this document and hence allow or not allow, depending on your business process. And then, of course, take care of your existing documents, which you yourself will have to take. How long do you want to retain it besides doing the masking activity? So you understand that by not doing it, the cost that came to the organization was far higher, that they had collected all of that, they had to do it, then plug it in, and then rue that. And that is why we say that today the AI models have progressed to such a level of that maturity that you can easily plug in these fundamental AI models in your digital journeys that not only identify it, make sure that they are of the what aspect you are covering, what you are extracting, what you're going to then further, depending on your business process, going to use it. So there are a number of solutions in this place, but I wanted to give you with an anecdote so that people understand that these things need to come into play as soon as possible whenever you're defining your digital journeys.
Yeah, but one may ask that it's okay if I can, how does it matter if I inaccurately classify something? Uh, are there is there a fundamental impact to the business? Maybe not. Uh, Sarita, do you see that as a challenge? Do you see that as a potential issue when it comes to DPDP or other privacy laws within India?
Misclassifying the data definitely is a bigger risk, okay, because we are till now talking about, we are way behind in identifying the data, where all the data is lying. Now we are saying once we have identified the data, we are not able to classify it. Let's take a very again, since we all are talking about Aadhaar, and that's definitely plays a very vital role till the time privacy has been declared as a fundamental rights in our country. So we can take its example. So Aadhaar is a 12 digit number,
Yeah,
right? So when it came for protection of Aadhaar ID, so there was a concept of VID also came into picture, correct?
correct.
So though it is permissible in the system to use the VID, so and Aadhaar, so if we are combining these two, definitely this is gonna create a huge kiosk in the environment. And the cost effective solution that government has built for all of our uses, in order to, while protecting the Aadhaar ID, the optimal uses of that would not be possible because of the misclassification. That's one. I spoke about the data minimization again. So if we are misclassifying, it can be both way, right? We are not classifying the data which requires to be protected, the sensitization behind the type of data has been missed out, so that would lead to various violation, right? It is direct violation if you don't know, have not classified, then definitely it is violating, right? So that is a vulnerable step itself. Okay, so we lot of consequences we can talk about. We fail to report the breach properly because we don't know that these are the data which requires to be protected or the classified. We also like missing on the points, like these data should be part of our consent even. The privacy notice that we are talking about, what all type of data we are capturing, where it should go. So entire enablement is evolving around this classification. So classification is a first step after data discovery, which has to be done diligently in any environment. So if you talk about your BFSI, healthcare, these are really, really critical sector which are already governed by the sectoral regulations, right? RBI, SEBI, IDI. So all of them have this data classification as part of their regulation as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think very, very solid points, Sarita. What I'm hearing from the chat also and people ask is, with the use of generative AI to tackle such problems, how can one make sure the cost of achieving DPDP compliance stays within control, right? Uh, I heard people speak about automating it. People speak about using AI models to do it. But the fundamental question is, what will be the cost of compliance, and where do we draw the line?
See, Gen AI, again, there are a lot of discussion we are using, right? Ethical uses of AI. It's no doubt you can leverage Gen AI up to a level, okay, where you can, let's say, compliance document aspect, okay? You want to create a document, you want to, it's a kind of an alternative to you right now from a Google perspective. That
Yeah.
Gen AI is again repeatedly, it has to be upgraded. Whatever data that you are giving behind, that needs to be upgraded periodically, then only it would give you the actual or the desired result that you are looking for. Now when we are talking about the data discovery and classification, it is whole lot of integration. We definitely can use the AIML, but Gen AI has a very limited uses at this domain.
Yeah. Ashish, since you look at technology at IDfy, anything that you're seeing as intersection to this?
Yeah, so the intersection comes from the perspective that uh, at the end of the day, this is the elephant in the room that is being discussed everywhere, right? Gen AI. And the whole idea is, while it is being used for creative purposes and all of that, it has the other nuances that it is being used where in a fraud or in another kind of environment. So the question then comes up is that, and everybody's trying, just like in security and all the domains, you're trying to stay ahead of the game to protect yourself, that the data that you have collected for the purpose for which you took the consent and all that, and knowing your customer, because that is what the sectoral or the other regulation requires you that whatever information you get in customer in a form is not Gen AI generated, but actually figured out that it is the valid document. It's not a picture of a document that you're taking, but of the original document. It is also that it has not been sort of in a mill-lice way transformed in that. And what is happening is the tampering solutions that you had, which were manual manipulations or digital manipulations, now you need to go one step further and see that these documents are not digitally created. And hence your tampering solution now needs to account for not only the digital manipulation or a physical manipulation, but the fact that it is Gen AI created. And it is in many respective, where it is in journeys which are where the person is required to be present, and whereas the journeys do it yourself journeys. And hence this comes into it. So examples of people, as you would have heard, which is going on, people are using their faces and they are representing other, the document face is being swapped by the person who's in the call from that perspective, and the documents themselves. And hence your solution now, it needs to incorporate that and some of the things at IDfy which we are working and providing to our customer solution is around that kind of space.
That sounds very interesting, Ashish. I want to switch gears a little bit and come back to what Devendra spoke about earlier. So Devendra, you mentioned the fact that in India there's a mentality to say I will keep backups of data in a number of places, and you also hinted at the fact that people keep this data in their laptops, right, locally. Do you see a challenge in terms of this particular mindset existing and the lack of discovery existing in such endpoints? Do you see a need for endpoint discovery also existing as a piece within this data discovery and data governance operation that we run?
See, I'll join the dots. We started with data discovery, came to data minimization. We talked about GenAI also. GenAI can be running at a server level, can be running maybe a chat GPT running at the endpoint level also.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I say I, the IT is not aware whether it is a running application or any agent running, or it is just a web browser being used. The key thing here is I'm using data to generate something, correct? Maybe at the endpoint or at server level. Am I sure about the data quality? Is it resulting in any kind of biases? Have I put in right kind of human in a loop or not? But I'm totally relying on the endpoint machine to give me a result, correct? That is where the overall data governance will come into the picture, which will take care of entire data lifecycle from collection till the destruction. This will also include all the endpoints. Endpoints, the reason they become very important is, let's take example, small example of sales people.
Yeah.
They're not collected to CRM. They depend everything on the endpoint. Everything is there. Marketing, everything is endpoint. You talk about bank opening the kiosk here. That is again endpoint. Correct. Click the picture, upload, and it is gone. You talk about travel and tourism. Talk about hospitals. Correct. So endpoint is having actually lot of data, and that is again linking back to the shadow data. So it is very, very important for any organization to have right kind of endpoint controls. Maybe it is a DLP, MDM solutions, plus data discovery also embedded. That I should be able to identify where this data is. That is purely from the governance structure pointer.
Yeah.
Let me switch it to the compliance. Where is it impacting? I am getting data subject request for a deletion. From servers I've deleted. What about endpoints?
Yeah.
Correct. For what all purpose are you using my data? Servers, CRM, analytics. This is easy to do. What happens at the endpoint? Someone is using chat GPT to generate few analytics parts. So my data, the purpose has changed suddenly, or I have repurposed the data. So that's where it's become very, very important to integrate your data discovery with the endpoint. I'll just take a 30-second more. I create an analogy what DLP did. Earlier, DLP was to the servers level. It finally people realized it has
Yeah.
to be exactly the same thing is going to happen with data discovery. It is must.
Is it technically feasible to do something like this though? Ashish, Devendra, anybody who want to take this up?
Yeah,
I like yes, yes. Sarita, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because definitely Devendra has already answered that. Okay. So DLP has now the endpoint DLPs are there. Integrating with it with a good agents of the data discovery tool, definitely we can identify, because that's a bigger problem in our country. The DPDP, when people are hearing about, everybody is talking about use cases. Okay, you go to the DLF building, they are taking the data in on the register. You go to the hospitals, okay, the people are taking the form filled and they are later on scanning it. All our data. You talk about your we spoke about even the aviation industry, which is such a critical industry, right? When we went down, the BCP was the whole lot of Excel, right, which has been followed. So that's everything has been Excel. So that data at the endpoint has to be protected. We have to use the data discovery agents that can run over the endpoints, and it has to be integrated with the DLP properly. There are EDRs and XDR solutions as well that you can also correlate and deploy these solutions in order to all this suspicious behavior, how the data flows is happening, in order to govern that. So those solutions are very well available in order to protect it. Yeah.
Understood. One question that I would ask as a privacy professional, right? I have about 20,000 laptops that are kind of rolled out to people in my company. Do I need to run data discovery of endpoint on those 20,000 laptops? Is it feasible to do something like this? What are the challenges one might come across if I have to run it on 20,000 devices? How long will it take?
See, I'll take this. The problem is quality is the biggest or the weakest link. 100% quality is the weakest link or to be a perfection. Reach
Yeah.
the public. I always suggest to most of the organization, please start, reach to 10%, go to 20%, 30%, 50%. Never ever think, can I target 20,000? Because the moment you start the journey, maybe with 5,000 laptops, you'll get to know the lay of the land first. You'll get to know the real risk exposure. Correct. The leakages will happen where the data lies. So let's revisit everything and say, okay, here is a phase-wise approach. Can it be done? Today's technology kind of bandwidth we have, the kind of computing powers we have, it can be done. Technologically, it can be done. Operationally, it should be a phase-wise approach.
I'll just jump in on Dave and expand it. I think he was mentioning that and the way he was talking to Phase. And I had a discussion with the client, just like what he was articulating, where large, medium to large organizations have more than 10 to 20, 30,000 devices. And I said, how are you organized? You are organized by business processes and departments. Okay. The users you have are of different roles. That means they have different rights and access. What he was alluding to, to the lay of the land that he was there, that you should take every business process and every department and find your data that landscape that exists of sensitivity nature that has been laid out in this. Once you have got that, then you have the next strategy of how to go ahead with the rest of the steps. But you cannot go in blind. You need to make yourself reveal the truth that exists. And then goes the next factor, which is about implementation, which he was representing to the technology. And what Sarita was also highlighting is there are tools and solutions that then help you achieve that. But at the same time, remember, for all of this, it's people, process, and technology. You just don't put all the technology. You will need to say, oh, when the shadow devices or the endpoints which are there, you will have also encryption available. You won't say, oh, encryption is only on my servers, but encryption is not on my devices. Oh, they're not password protected. Oh, on the devices they are protected. It cannot be all of that. So the same principles that you apply, you would have to consider that on your endpoint devices as well, and then follow the process what Dave and Sarita were alluding to.
See, I'll just put a closing remark for this. Security is for the organization, data privacy is for the data. That's the key difference. If we are able to understand this, then implementation becomes pretty easy.
I think you kind of very well segued into the next section, which is what I was going to talk about. Is now that I've run discovery, now that I understand where the data is, does this mean I can prevent a breach? What are the other risk surface attacks that exist when for me to, as an organization under DPDPA, respond to a breach in less than 72 hours? What are the operational challenges that come up in discovery trying to solve for those? Uh, what is the role of discovery when it comes to responding to a DPDPA breach, which says in 72 hours you have to submit a detailed report to the data protection board? Can it help? Will it help? I don't know. Maybe Devendra, Sarita, Ashish, you guys feel this will solve for anything?
So let me bring in an anecdote from our mythology Ramayana. When Lord Rama asked Hanumanji to please go and search where Sita is. That's a discovery. But then the problem was how the trust will come into the picture, how the consent will come into the picture, correct? So he gave that ring. What was the ring doing? It was less like a token, correct? That's a consent and identity verification done at the same time. The analogy here is if you have done the discovery, then marrying identification and containing any breach becomes easier. If I don't know where my data is, then it is very difficult to even contain or report a breach in 72 hours. So this is very, very important. The first activity automatically gets linked to the second. If first is not done, then second becomes very, very difficult. And if you remember, there was this incident that happened, I think, with one of the pizza chain. They lost a lot of Aadhaar data. The reason was they were unable to contain just because they were not aware. They were just not aware. So
Yeah.
breach continued. So that's my summation on linking this to data discovery and breach and reporting it within the time frame. And the authorities are minimizing. Certain has come to 6 hours. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's my take.
I would just add it over here. So, definitely data discovery plays a very vital role. That's we spoke about because Devendra has already narrated a great anecdote that we all have related. So, the keyword over is an effective integration in the system. So ensure that when you have identified the discovered the type of data, there is a coupled integration between your discovered data, how you have classified it, whom does it belong to. Okay, then always keep it predefined, because I saw somebody has written on the 72 hours to the data principle. It's absolutely right. So in between this there are data processors who also comes into the picture. It's a responsibility of the data controller. So imagine the tight timeline that every organization need to keep in mind. That can only be achieved if we have an effective implementation, a combination of people process technology that Ashish also spoke about. Yeah.
Yep.
Jump in to just add a little bit on that spectrum. When we talk about breach, it's not that the breach as a concept has not been there. The world we come from, security breach is a principle there. But now we are talking about specifically now the breach can be in very various forms. So I just wanted to allude to that the breach, when the thing, what would a data principle talk about the breach if it was? You did not use the data for the purpose that I wanted, right? He's not looking at the security breach, it's the internal one. So there are breaches of different forms, and that we have to understand from a data principle perspective, from an organization perspective, from a third party perspective, from a data processor perspective. And the biggest challenge is also a whole thing about data processors, which we can talk later. But the idea is that if you have your discovered data, how do you map all this data within your ecosystem of your organization, right? And this requires you, and when we were thinking about this problem as well, coming from my implementations of different digital journeys in the banks and healthcare and all of that, you typically have business processes. And these business processes collect data. Now, this data then goes and forms a part of that flow, which it goes to, let's say, a insight or a warehouse. It goes to your data warehouse. It gets into operational systems that may be required to print and those cards and all of that. And it's required that you map all of this with that in mind. Because if my data asset gets breaches, you need to know which are the principles that are accounted for, right? And if you're talking about a breach is happening from an external perspective, which are the assets of that business process? Because you found a vulnerability in an application. So then you need to know what assets could have been potentially compromised. You need to draw, when you say 72 hours, the investigation that requires you to do is build a boundary around that spectrum. If you don't, otherwise you can say the entire organization got breached. Nobody's going to do that, right? It's not a viable thing. So laying this, if you map the flow of the data using the discovery and other techniques and using encryption and other techniques supporting that, you will be able to put the flow and identify what is the ramifications of the breach where it took place and what is there you have to act. So in according to, you can create the breach report, which you then need to support to the DPO board and identify the data principles that are affected by it so that you can do the right communication and then follow it up with the right investigation, following it with then supporting the entire process of how do you make sure it doesn't ever happen again.
Shiv, one thing that you brought out as part of what you explained is data breach is one thing. There's also privacy breach, and what the bulb that went up or lit in my head was: does this mean discovery and then consent and breach have to talk to each other? Are we now looking at three systems that kind of coexist to solve for a breach problem, and the breach could be data or privacy? Is that what you're kind of alluding to?
Yeah, in a way, yes, right? Because you're not just taking for the consent and saying my job is done, right? I took the data from you and I've done the kind. And it doesn't stop, okay, I've taken your data and I've stored it in a, let's say, so-called data vault, potentially, right? Or in a this, or I have taken the routes. It requires you to map the entire process clearly and not just once on a continuous basis, because no digital journey remains same. And that is also the important thing. So you need to make this a continuous process in your organization.
Devendra,
In short, embed privacy by design in your organization. So anytime and every time you are maybe expanding, or there are any changes that you are going through across your organization, you can assess holistically and see where the need of privacy is there.
yeah. If I were to summarize the last half an hour of our discussion, what I'm hearing from all of you guys is data governance is key. Under DPDPA, it becomes even more paramount for us to make sure we have some sort of data governance process in place. One question that is still coming to me is the scope seems too big. Right? Where do I start as an enterprise? What are the key areas that you guys would recommend to start as a starting activity and then cover? And Devendra, you alluded to it, but if you can double down on that. Uh,
So I think somewhere we have covered it. I'll say let's not start boiling the ocean. Correct. Uh, all of us understand what are the regulatory requirements in our own field or domain or sector. What are the critical business processes I have? What are the critical data within those processes? So the good start point is to first to understand our own journey, our own domain. Where am I regulated? Which are the key processes? Associated data which I need to control. Then I need to put in privacy by design, data minimization, all those privacy ops kind of scenarios. That should be a good starting point. I can look for automating it. I can look for creating a PI dictionary, complete my personal data dictionary. If I am a client facing, I can start with CRM. If it is purely, there are organizations who have, in a B2B space, employee data becomes critical. I might start with HRIS system,
yeah.
correct? So that's become where, who am I and what's the kind of data, whether it is vendor, client, or just the employee. And then increase your scope. Start do the pilot with one business unit. I think Ashish brought this point. So my take it, let's not start boiling the ocean. Start with one business, a critical one, and then keep expanding, keep expanding.
Rita, anything you? Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
go ahead,
Ashish.
sir.
No, absolutely. I do agree what they've said, because it has to be always a step-by-step approach that we should take. So, in just, I would say, let's focus on the high risk and high volume. When I'm talking about the risk, understand what is the organizational specific risk that lies around the data that you are handling, or the personal data that you are handling, right? So that would be the key. So you can have a combination of a data criticality plus the exposure likelihood. Okay, so you can combine both while taking a decision, or build a roadmap how you would expand it. Like, you can slowly begin from your storage data, and then you can keep your endpoints, considering the exposure, considering the criticality of the data. You need to plan it well. Yeah, Ashish, please.
Yeah, so if I wanted to give my final thoughts, I would just put it in three perspective. In my discussions when I've been having with the folks and all of that, whenever they talk to me, DPDP, they say, "Our cost of compliance hai, cost of compliance hai, cost of compliance hai." तो मैंने बोला सर आपका मैं डेटा सारा ले लूं, ट्रांजैक्शन डेटा मैं ले लूं, आपका मेडिकल डेटा ले लूं, मैं आपका सबका आपका जो भी ब्राउजिंग हिस्ट्री ले लूं और ये मैं वेब पे डाल दूं, आपको चलेगा? नहीं 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 नहीं, मेरा नहीं चलेगा. So my 1-2 cents to everybody is, don't think of it like a cost of compliance. You got to have a data privacy. You can call it by privacy by design. Being a technology person, I call it data privacy architecture. It's just another term. But the fundamental is, please, the first thing that needs to happen is your mindset needs to change. It's not a cost of compliance. Data privacy by design or data privacy architecture as part of your overall thing needs to be. The second is, now that the act and rule that was being formed and it is there, you need to make sure that your organization policy is aligned with that. Your current, the way you show your notices, the way your privacy policy stands is not generally based on whatever journeys we have inspected. Does not stand with the act and rules. So get them aligned so that you can start that process. Now, the third one, which I would like to say is, no organization is starting from a blank slate. Like you saw the experience with Dave and Sarita Walla. Every organization has certain key securities in place, certain key data in place, but it has gaps, right? So the fundamental thought process is you need to address those gaps. You can come from your data assets using the data discovery, and you can come from your business applications and see where you are using it for what purpose. And then please do not forget, most breaches are happening. You must account for and don't think of third-party risk management as doing some audit. You need to bring the data processors in line with you. Even if the act says that the data fiduciary is responsible, the idea they've given is that the data fiduciary should help the ecosystem of data processors align with this privacy act and rules, and not something that they can run their show and you will run your show, and that is not going to happen. So please put that data processors in that. If you see the current breaches that happened, it was one of the data processors which leaked out in many ones, I'm sure, where they would have gone, they'd have seen this example. So that is my 4 things that I would like to leave the audience with.
Thank you so much, Ashish, for this. With this, I open it up to the attendees to ask any questions that they might have. We'll start going through the questions from the chat. I'll take the first one. So Vivek is asking the question that, should data discovery in question be on-premise or SaaS? Using SaaS for discovery, does it sound counterproductive? Because the whole idea is protect and control. Where do you see this heading? Ashish, Devendra, anybody of you want to take this up?
Okay, this is very interesting. In India, many banks, which because banks is one of the highest regulated entity, at least in India. The myth is, or the thought is, if I go SaaS, my entire data is out. No. There are solutions who will only pick up your metadata or the data type, not the actual data. So then that way SaaS is equally safe. But you need to understand the technology behind the solution being provided. One, if you are getting deeper into it, where you consolidate your data, that's where the on-prem solution will come into the picture, for what we call it as the data catalog.
Yep.
So to answer, it depends on the kind of solution you are bringing in. But most of the solution which I've seen, the SaaS perfectly works because they only pick up the metadata. They don't pick up the actual personal data. So it works fine.
Thanks for that, Dev. The next question that Sanjeev is asking is, how can any educational organization start the DPDPA compliance process? I think that's an interesting one.
Maybe Sarita and Ashish can add, but I'm also very close to EdTech. I keep on advising a lot of EdTech. In India, the children data is still considered to be like, okay, let's not get into the California law. But yes, soon EdTech will get ahead because they deal with a lot of children data and their medical data also. Where they can start is the what Sarita mentioned, bringing privacy by design principles. Maybe not all seven, maybe just three, four. What's the kind of data they are collecting, where they are storing their websites or their application are mostly outsourced. At least bringing even those basic control, basic hygiene. If I have to put it in a nutshell, they have the policy in place. Let that policy not be laminated, but they are living that policy. That's the key difference.
Yeah,
Sarita,
I
if you would like
I
to add.
would definitely add, because not just as a speaker over here or a practitioner in this domain, as a parent. Okay, so when I go to the school or share any information, so I have seen here, at least in the tier 1 cities, so they have implemented the consent mechanism, okay, which is already in place. And if you go to the all the large schools, so they have it in place, okay, because that's a very very critical aspect, and it lies across the sector in a pieces. Okay, it's not that consent has been got introduced by DPDP. If you go to the healthcare, you provide the consent, but the whether that is adequate enough, whether that can be challenged by the regulation, that part is yet to be covered. So edtech is definitely a very very critical area, though the regulation is not stronger, but that's something we have to focus on. And I would suggest all the basics we must definitely take it, because when we spoke about the data criticality and the exposure likelihood, okay, when we are talking about gamut of a big organization who are handling gamut of data, or the banking, let's say, so they are across pan India. There are very rare edtech platforms who are connected across, okay, because it's still standalone applications which are handling this data, so the data is very low, so the exposure likelihood are very less, but it is still very critical. So it's high time. Definitely we need to think around it and ensure that, at least from a technology standpoint, all the provisions are enabled, because that's definitely gonna get into the cover of the, let's say, the startup. When the rules are getting defined, it may fall under the MSME or the smaller startup organizations. So that category we are foreseeing. Yeah.
Just I'll just take 30 seconds more. From school, the journey starts. I don't even want to touch universities. Just for application process, a lot of data being collected, and God knows what happens to that data. So there's a different level or a different domain to handle the university area. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area.
Yep. Thanks for that, Dev and Sarita. Sanjay is asking, is there a list that you would recommend in terms of what should a good data discovery tool have? And are there suggestions from NIST or similar organizations?
I
Uh,
think you can take it up, Rishikesh. Yeah,
yeah,
the better
uh,
person to talk about it.
yes. Well, I think I'll let Ashish or maybe you guys add and then.
I'll just add, and Dave probably can chip in as well in this. Basically, uh, being coming from IDfy, where we are providing a product in this space, naturally there is a set of bias that you can take it from us. But the bias doesn't come from the fact that we want you necessarily, but that it's actually end of the day a solution. And what we are saying is that first, your data resides in multiple digital assets, or with whatever, be it structured, unstructured, and all of that. So a data discovery tool should be 360 degrees in that perspective. They can look at structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data. It can go and deep dive into it. In the sense, remember, data is not only at columns levels. You have now complex data structures like JSON, which are used to share between them. So it should be able to deep dive into that data. Unstructured, you must make sure you're living in the India environment. You don't want a tool or a solution that tells you, I do this, but I don't look at all the Indian documents, the formats and the structures that we have. It must have coverage for them in a way that it does highly accurately, and not that. It should have solutions which can take you, and as we were been discussing, cater to shadow data. It should be looking at endpoint devices. That is a fundamental ones which are there. And then give you very clear insights into where does your data lie with respect to your digital journeys, and how does it get from that, and how is it flowing through your ecosystem, which we talk about data lineage as one of the key aspects, looking at not only internally flowing, but externally flowing, living in the geographical domains that is necessary for it to do it, so that you can get the full perspective from that. If you get it, so that, because that is what we have found, that other solutions have been point-based solutions and have had. That does not mean that one encompassing tool may be enough, or we are saying you should be able to leverage your existing tools and technologies that you have invested in and do that. It's not about saying, okay, do away with all of it and we will bring it, or that. That's not how it works. It has never worked in that system. It must complement your existing technology and your assets in order to bring about and fill all your gaps that are necessary to do it. That's how I would put it.
Yeah, and it has to be looked up as a more technical demand of your organization. So it's not related to right now the way, like you are talking about NIST framework and all. So we cannot assess the data discovery solution in that angle. So whenever you are evaluating any data discovery solution, the right questions to ask is to self, like to the organization, where all you want to integrate, what all devices you want to, where you feel your data is moving around. Okay, so those whether that those solutions can be integrated properly or not, what type of solution they are using, agent based, agentless, so those type of questions you can work on.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Sarita and Ashish. Uh, we might have time for one last question. So Anuj is asking, there's a vast ocean to cover. How do we know when to stop and how to balance incorporating of all these activities of compliance while not making it too complex? I think all of us related to that a lot in the discussion, but if something you would want to share for Anuj, the panel.
So for compliance reminds me of a very interesting punchline by SCMHRD, Symbiosis Institute. They have a punchline. Reward is the journey. Oh, sorry, the journey is the reward. Same goes for compliance. The journey is the reward. Compliance is like, you cannot say, today I stand 100% compliant.
Yeah.
Risk is always there. It's a journey, you keep on moving because your business is expanding. So if I may ask the business guy, are you going to stop business today? Are you going to stop sales today? No. So if you are expanding your sales, you're expanding businesses, you're expanding geographies, more compliance requirement will come into picture. So a plain simple answer is, it's a journey and you keep on living that journey.
Thanks. Ashish, Sarita, anybody of you guys want to add
Yeah,
to
just it's a journey, not a destination, just to complete. So definitely you have to, the way we see, look at the education governance, the way we are seeing across the legal practices, so around, in order to, so the way it's we are moving in our life, it's similar. Compliance is something we should never look at it as a overhead or afterthought. You feel like it's a journey, so you have to always, whatever you are doing, it has to run in parallel. That gives you assurance, nothing else. It's you are getting the assurance, nobody is forcing you. Okay, you need an independent body to have the governance, because we all alone cannot do everything. So you have to look at it, the compliance in that way. It's for you only, it's not for the regulatory bodies or for anything. Everywhere we need the ethical practices to be followed, everywhere we are looking for the data protection, everything, right? I think Ashish or Deb spoke about, when they asked somebody that would you like your data to be on the open platform, everybody says no. When it comes to us, it's a no. So it's similarly, we have to look at others data when we are collecting their data in order to fulfill our business purpose. The compliance is something which helps us to get that assurance, give that assurance. Yeah.
I will just round by saying, यार ocean है पर आप डूबेंगे नहीं. साथ में आप, if you take the kind of things we said, I'm sure you'll be able to ride through it and you will enjoy the ride then also. It's not that take it as a burden, because that's what I said, that mindset is important. Trusted that your data and all of our data, which is here, we are the panelists are there and the attendees, all our data needs to be protected. And there are ways and technologies to do it. You don't, it's not that it's not insurmountable. So please feel free. We can sail through this ocean.
Well, thank you, Ashish, Devendra, and Sarita for your time today. I hope I'm already seeing people chime in and say this was informative for them. Thank you for people to join in. If I were to summarize the discussion in 2 lines, this is what I would take away. Data governance is paramount as of today. It cannot be an afterthought anymore. And people have to, or enterprises have to think of governance of data tying into breach and consent. It cannot be thought in isolation because that will lead to nowhere. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dev. Thanks, Sarita.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.